You are not numb. Numbness would feel flat, disconnected, hollow. What you are experiencing now has weight without friction. Things still register. Sounds land. Conversations happen. Decisions get made. But something subtle no longer completes itself the way it once did. A familiar trigger appears, something that used to pull you instantly, and it doesn't travel inward the same way. There is no rush to meet it. No tightening that demands a response. No internal movement that tries to explain, defend, or fix what just happened. The moment arrives, but nothing inside you reaches out to grab it. Not resistance. Not avoidance. Just the absence of access. The stimulus still exists, but it no longer knows where to go. It touches the surface and finds no handle. And without anything to grip, it passes through without disturbance. That absence can feel strange at first. Not because something is wrong, but because the drama you were trained to expect never arrives. The mind quietly waits, sensing that something important should happen next. And when nothing does, the silence becomes noticeable. What's missing isn't feeling. It's an escalation. Before, certain triggers carried authority. They didn't just inform you, they organized you. A tone, a delay, a look would immediately signal urgency. The body tightened. The mind assembled meaning. Identity stepped forward to manage the moment. Now the same trigger appears, and that authority fails to activate. You notice what happened without being mobilized by it. Sensation occurs without issuing commands. Emotion can arise without recruiting your entire system to respond. This is why the state is often misread. It lacks contrast. It lacks spikes. It lacks the familiar surge that once confirmed something mattered because it shook you. Praise doesn't inflate you the way it once did. Criticism doesn't collapse you the way it once did. Not because you stopped caring, but because care is no longer fused with self-protection. The trigger still exists as information, but it no longer carries instruction. You can feel something without turning it into a problem to solve. You can notice discomfort without building a story around it. Before this shift, triggers worked because they activated everything at once. A single word connected to memory, meaning, identity, and future projection. The body reacted before thought arrived. Thought justified what the body had already decided. That speed made the reaction feel inevitable. Now that speed is gone. The first link might still appear. You hear the comment, feel the sensation, but the rest of the chain doesn't follow automatically. The system pauses without being told to pause. Not through effort. Not through control. The pathway simply no longer conducts energy the same way. This is what being out of reach feels like. The trigger doesn't fail because you resisted it. It fails because it cannot propagate. It cannot organize you from the inside anymore. The body stays softer. The breath doesn't sharpen. The future doesn't rush forward to be managed. Sometimes you notice the pause before you notice anything else, a quiet gap where reaction used to live. And in that gap, nothing asks you to do anything about what just happened. One of the clearest differences appears after the moment ends. Before, even when something was over, it lingered. A replay. A delayed explanation. A quiet internal review of what it meant about you. That residue kept the system engaged long after the event passed. Now the loop closes on its own. A comment is made, and it ends where it ends. Discomfort rises and settles without being carried forward. You don't need to let it go. There is simply nothing inside you holding it open. This isn't detachment. Detachment feels like pulling away. This feels like completion without effort. Sometimes there's even a brief surprise at how quickly something dissolves, as if the system expected more to happen and nothing did. That surprise isn't confusion. It's the recognition of a missing reflex. The reflex to turn reaction into meaning is gone. And without that reflex, the trigger has nowhere left to travel. There is often a moment when the mind tries to understand this state using old categories. It offers familiar labels. Numb. Disconnected. Detached. Something must be missing, it suggests, because the reaction didn't arrive on schedule. But the evidence doesn't support the conclusion. You can still feel interested. You can still feel discomfort. You can still feel warmth, concern, even intensity, when the situation actually calls for it. What's absent is compulsion. For a long time, reactivity was how aliveness was measured. If something moved you strongly, it mattered. If it didn't, something must be wrong. Now aliveness confirms itself differently. Through continuity. You remain yourself before, during, and after an event. There is no internal rebuilding required once it passes. And without that need, the old triggers lose their leverage. They required your participation, your amplification, your personalization. Without that, they remain local, unable to reorganize the whole system. The body reveals this shift more clearly than thought ever could. Before, triggers lived in the body first. Tightening, quickened breath, a subtle lean toward action or defense. Mobilization arrived before awareness. Now the body doesn't follow. Sensation may arise, but it doesn't cascade. Muscles stay softer. Breathing remains steady. There is no internal countdown toward response. You're not calming yourself. You're not regulating after the fact. The system is already regulated enough to stay where it is. Even when something genuinely challenging occurs, the response becomes clean rather than reflexive. Movement happens when it's required. Stillness remains when it's not. Nothing is being suppressed. Nothing is being held down. There simply isn't anything rising that needs containment. The old triggers relied on urgency. Without physiological acceleration, they lose their leverage and quietly fall away. What ultimately stabilizes this state isn't understanding it. It's noticeable that nothing collapses without reactivity. Life continues. Relationships remain intact. Decisions still get made. Days pass without internal repair. Moments end without residue. Identity no longer reshapes itself around every experience. You are still reachable by what truly matters. You still care. You still engage. What's gone is the automatic loss of center. This doesn't feel dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It proves itself by lasting. By how little effort is required to remain intact. By how ordinary it becomes. The old triggers may still appear at the edges of awareness, but they no longer organize your inner world. They don't dictate posture, breath, or self-definition. They pass. And nothing needs to be done about that. Not because you're numb, but because their authority is gone.